Hey, what's going on, everyone? It's Friday afternoon again out here in California. It could be Friday evening where you are. It could even be Saturday for some of us who might be on the other side of the world. But wherever you are, it's time for another episode of Cinema Crusaders. That's right, Cinema Crusaders, where we talk about older movies most of the time because we want to bring them back for all of you out there. And this month, September, we are doing all fantasy movies. So, in preparation for next month, Halloween Movie Madness. And we got a poll live on Twitter right now where you can pick one of the movies we're going to do. So, go check that out on Twitter at Cinema Crusaders. But, like I said, we're talking fantasy movies. We talked about Dragon Slayer last week. And this week, my phone is going to go off right now. We are talking about The Golden Voyage of Sinbad, a movie done by Ray Harryhausen. But we are going to get into all that in just a moment. Before I do that, I want to introduce my co-host. I will say Lance is out there busy making movies of his own, so he's not be able to be with us today. So good luck out there, Lance, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. But two of my fellow Cinema Crusaders are here with me. First, I want to introduce a man who is a writer for Omen Comics and also Revelation. He does Blitz. He's also a writer on a project that I've got coming out through Raincross Press, which is Blood World. I'm talking about none other than Steve Shadewing Sellers. How you doing, Steve?
Doing pretty good. Now, make sure that have faith in Allah, but tie up your camel. This particular movie is not one that I had ever seen before. I haven't watched a lot of Harryhausen beyond Clash of the Titans and things like that. So this was kind of actually interesting to me. And it is fun in terms of being like this old school swashbuckling, type action, with these fantasy elements and all this fun, voyaging to Lost Lemuria and all these things. But there are some things that are a little silly about it too. So I can't get into that.
Yeah, it's just old school fantasy, and I'll be honest with you, this has a lot of nostalgia for me. So when I see those stop motion figures moving around, and it just gets my heart. It gets me right in the feels because these are the kind of movies that my dad and I used to sit down and watch all the time. He'd take me to watch, and I watched all these, and yeah, it just endears itself to me. It's so much fun, even if I really don't care what's going on plot wise anymore. I mean, I do know the plot because I've watched it so many times. I'm here for the stop motion animation and everything else. But before we get into that, I want to talk about our second Cinema Crusader is here with me today. He is a writer. He's also an artist. He has his own line or his own universe of comics that he works in, but he's also a podcaster with me and the art director, a writer, and an artist, a man of many talents on Blood World from Raincross Press. I'm talking about none other than Jeff Bracey. How you doing, Jeff?
It is written.
Mr. Happy there.
This is the greatest Sinbad movie yet to be made.
You know what? We're going to have to talk about that because I think there is one that might give it a run for its money, which is,
Infidel!
in my opinion, Eye of the Tiger. I love Golden Sinbad and the Eye of the Tiger. So, but we can get into that. So let's do this right now. We are talking about the Golden Voyage of Sinbad. Now, for all of you who don't know who Sinbad is, Sinbad arises out of the Arabian Nights, 1001 Tales, and he is one of those tales about a Sinbad the sailor, and it's a mythological figure. And he's kind of a famous sailor that sailed around the Muslim world and had all sorts of adventures. So kind of I think it would be fair to say, in a mythological standpoint, think of Odysseus from the Greek world, but this is their version of it. And he's just kind of a sailor that goes around and he gets into all of these different troubles or adventures and things as he's sailing around the seas around the Arabian Peninsula.
For a more modern perspective, you could call him a more competent Captain Jack Sparrow, because he's a wily adventurer. And,
he was the Conan of his day as well.
Yeah, he's a swashbuckler who gets by on his wits, charm, and skill.
Yeah. And it's really cool. I have to say that as a kid, I dressed up as Sinbad several Halloweens. I thought he was really cool. I think for all of those people who complained about diversity, now we are going to talk about diversity from a certain aspect, but here was a guy who was just cool and an action hero and everything, but it was all about a Muslim superhero, basically. I mean, he's not a superhero in the sense that he has powers, but he's kind of like a Muslim Indiana Jones, I guess. That would be a better way to put it. Going around and with all these adventures and everything. And the movies did portray the fact, they showed a version of this Muslim world and going around to the different bazaars and everything. And it was just such a cool thing as a kid for me to watch it. And I really loved it. So I want to talk a little bit about how you guys saw that, how they portrayed that for a 1970s audience, which might surprise some people, and then also talk a little bit about the casting, because we also have to realize we're in the 1970s, so they're casting these Muslim, these Arab heroes, and how they did that. So I'm gonna go Steve first, because you this is the first time you saw it, so I'm curious to see what you saw with, on a first viewing, and then I'm gonna go to Jeff. So Steve, what did you think of the movie that way?
Sure. One thing that I really kind of liked about it is that it kind of reminded me of it's a swashbuckling adventure, kind of in the air of Errol Flynn. And if you look at John Philip Law, who plays this guy, and I know this guy from like Danger Diabolik and things like that. He's definitely trying to play an Errol Flynn type of character, also with these elements of the Sinbad character and these Iranian elements that try to use into it. While I don't think that he's that convincing as an Arabian character, I did think he was convincing as a swashbuckler. So that got me through it. I mean, he absolutely is having to play this character. He's switching it up with this villain, having all these fun sword fights and exploring all these areas. I mean, you can kind of see where this movie had influence on things like Indiana Jones, investigating lost cities and buried treasure and them and these other characters and the villain, having this race, to see who finds the mystical object at the end of the tunnel, so all that stuff is there. So it's a little bit watching this. It has that fantasy element, but it also has that Errol Flynn type of. And it also has the Indiana Jones type aspect. And I think that all those things makes it come together, and it is fun to watch. Are there silly elements? Yes. Are there things that are never explained? Yes. The whole way it's set up is a bit. Yes, but when you're in the middle of the action and you're just watching Sinbad, cut loose against a giant statue of Kali, you don't care. You just don't care because it is so entertaining and special effects are so good and the action so good that it doesn't really matter how much it doesn't make sense. It doesn't matter that Tom Baker has like a million layers of plot armor, and he just seems to get away at every single turn with everything. And also because Tom Baker is such an awesome actor that it doesn't matter. That guy, by the way, was a very convincing Arab, and in fact, I would put him in Joel Grey as Chun levels of being able to play somebody that doesn't look like him. So hats off to that. I will say I enjoyed what I watched. From a logical perspective, there are things where I would say if it was done today, like, come on, you'd never get away with that. But when you have characters that are this fun, when you have characters that are charismatic, played by actors that are very charismatic, and the spectacle is so good, and the action is so good, it's just like, okay, I can live with it, not a problem.
Tom Baker had a great stare in this movie, I have to say. I mean, his ability with his eyes and everything was pretty incredible. What I will say is it's interesting if you look at these movies, the timing of the movies, there were quite a few Sinbad movies over the years, and then they stopped all of a sudden. And I don't think it's a coincidence they stopped when you had things like the Marine barracks bombing and the Iranian hostage crisis, and a number of different other things. Before that, much of the Middle Eastern world was very different than what we might think of today, and so I think that it had an effect on these tales, and it's unfortunate because I think these are a large part of what they offered as well. And I think. Yeah, I mean, I just enjoyed them, and I just remember them disappearing right around that time. So I know that it is a very much a fanciful and stylized look at medieval, um, Muslim culture and everything, and the Muslim society. But and it's much the same way that I think, would look at like a King Arthur or something for medieval times for those types of things as well. So that said, oh, Steve is here twice. Can you hear us?
Yeah, I
Okay.
can hear you now. For some reason, I dipped out for some reason. I imagine the other me is.
Yeah, I'll remove this one. So, Jeff, what did you think of the film? How it portrayed the characters, the way the characters were cast as well, because we need to talk about that because that is a big thing, especially in today's world. And, just the general setting of the Sinbad movie.
I will say on the point that you brought up, it is sad that those movies went away for a long time. I don't think I saw anything even remotely Arabian again until Disney decided to tackle Aladdin.
Correct.
And, it's such a rich, vibrant world. The Arabian world is just full of so much wonderful color. You see it in the way the ship's painted. You see it in the costumes, the tapestries. The mythology is very rich, which was a lot of fun here, among other things. So, I'm a big fan of mythology and culture. So it was really nice to go back and see this again. It had been a long time since I'd seen this film, so that was pretty great. Discussing the film itself, I think the cast was largely pretty excellent. Let's just get it out there and say it. She didn't have a big part, and by that I mean like a meaty part. But Caroline Munro is like so easy on the eyes, even as a prepubescent girl. Even as a prepubescent boy, I was paying attention to her, and it's funny because they wanted her to be sexy, but this was a Disney produced film, so it was like a PG-13 kind of sexy.
Right.
It was still sexy, like I'm not even like riding the hormone train.
Best known for Hammer horror films.
Yeah. I'm not even riding the hormone train yet, and I'm like, just glued to it. John Law, I thought he was pretty darn good. He's a lot of fun. He has the swagger you need as an adventuring, swashbuckling captain. People will know him from things like Danger Diabolique or the Blind Angel from Barbarella. The guy's been in like 500,000 things. Talented actor. Like Steve said, his makeup doesn't quite pass as Arabian, but it's close enough. They did make an effort to cast a number of people who are at least swarthy.
Right.
And again, I got to go with Tom Baker. He sells it, man. Like you talk about, that guy is convincingly Arabian in this film, just as Joel Grey was a perfect casting choice for Chun. Just the kind of thing you don't normally think you'd say. You're like, oh, yeah, you're doing this kind of thing. But it's the, coming off the 60s into the 70s, you just got to deal with it. It's not like Hollywood was swarmed with every type of, ethnic actor you could want out there. It just wasn't available. And from a studio perspective, and it still goes on to this very day, you want to put a bigger actor in there as a draw. You don't make a movie. You don't make a big movie, let's say. You don't make a big movie not to make your money back and then some.
Right.
That's why, like, Star Wars is one of those rare cases because they had no idea it was going to be. So Lucas was free to cast a majority of unknowns. He got one guy. He got Alec Guinness, one known guy, and that's what really got that movie made when you get right down to it. Everybody else was unknown to relatively unknown. So, yeah, you throw you throw Law in there, and he does the job. So for my part, like if you got a problem with the cast in this film, like yeah, don't even bother.
Yeah.
Different time, different world, different reasons for it. So yeah, they did what they did the best they could with what they had at the time,
I
and
think
it turned out really good.
I brought it up because I think it's worth talking about because it's always going to be one of the number one things that's talked about now. And then they always bring up the fact that John Wayne played Genghis Khan,
And it was
or
horrible.
yeah,
And we can all agree it was horrible.
It was.
But
I mean, like there's like that's
Even back then
it's
they
the
laughed at
worst
it.
possible. Yeah, it's the worst possible casting. I imagine even Wayne was like, "You really want me to do this? All right, well, give me that truckload of money then." Because
yeah,
he knew it was dumb. He's like, "I'd much rather be doing a western
yeah.
or maybe a war film." So yeah, this I've got no problem with the casting in this, given the time period.
Yeah.
You just
Mhm.
didn't have the availability of the range of actors that you can get today.
And
And
I will say that at least they made, and I say at least only by saying that by today's standards. I enjoy the movie. I enjoyed it as a kid. I still enjoy it now. But at least they made the effort to
they
try
made
and
the
make
effort.
to make it to place it within the Arab world, to try and push them in authentic Arab dress. I mean, we talk so much about Wayne and Genghis Khan, but I think one of the most ridiculous things it was when they try and tell us in You Only Live Twice that Sean Connery
Oh,
can
geez,
pass
that's
as
another
being
horrible one.
Japanese. So
Absolutely
it's
horrible. The makeup didn't work.
yeah,
He didn't even remotely look
It was
Asian.
a borderline offensive.
Where
yeah,
where was the Chun makeup artist when we know? Like, just send him back in time. Like, get him to work
yeah.
back. So
So
no, I do appreciate that they tried to ground this as much in this fantasy Arabia as they could, because the elements are there, the textures there. They quote what they think sounds very topical at the time. They
mhm,
reference Allah quite a bit. Scriptures it is written. They are sayings. They worked very hard on the accents, I think, in a way that wasn't stereotypical.
yeah.
You could have very easily gone very stereotypical with this movie, and I think they had the goodwill not to do that, and they just wanted to make a good piece of entertainment in a area that we hadn't really seen. We had the previous Sinbad films, but like this is my favorite, and it's one of the most successful. I'll also give you Eye of the Tiger is really, really super duper excellent. Two best Sinbad films. Still, this one's
I
the best. But they
and I
did go there. They had the love for the material.
absolutely, and I will say that Ray Harryhausen was always wanted to bring these types of stories to the big screen. This is what he was really about.
Mhm.
And he had to work with what he had to work with.
A
Hollywood
man who
was,
clearly loved mythology as well.
yeah. I mean, he did Clash of the
Oh, yeah.
Titans. Burgess Meredith doesn't look Greek. Laurence Olivier doesn't look Greek. But it didn't matter because what they were doing was bringing us these stories.
Mhm.
And so I think we need to always take that into account, which is why I wanted to bring it up, because it is something that you hear about all the time. But this is why we review these movies, because yes, it happened, but that doesn't mean that you can't enjoy the movies and enjoy them for the time period they were in and enjoy everything that they did absolutely perfectly and just say, you know what?
Yeah,
Maybe we would do it different now, but this
doesn't.
movie wasn't made now. So
I'll say this: it doesn't make it a bad film. And let me add this to this point. I've recently been rereading the works of Robert E. Howard. I've read a lot of Conan growing up, and I've decided to read some of his other works. And I was shocked because I hadn't remembered just how much he and authors of his day. I mean, I know I'm also a big fan of H.P. Lovecraft, and I know he did it. But
Mhm.
digging back into some of these things, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Robert E. Howard, H.P. Lovecraft, these guys were pretty flipping racist when you start reading their stuff. They're always talking about race. This guy has got the high Aryan, and he's a fine man of his Irish race. Oh, he's got a touch of Mongoloid in him over there. But the story, even when you get to that and it's distasteful, the stories are still worth having. And I say
mhm.
the same thing here.
Now
I would
let's
say the question is, how glaring is it? Is it so glaring and off-putting that it takes you out of the movie? That to me is the only
Yeah.
standard that matters.
yeah. And I don't think it is. I think you can easily suspend disbelief and fall into this fantasy world and enjoy it. I think this is just incredible, and I think a large part of it has to do, obviously, with the effects. Any Ray Harryhausen movie, you're gonna have an amazing effects, and I wanted to talk about that before. I want to, I'm kind of doing it backwards, but I want to talk about the story itself and how they built the story and get into the plot armor that Steve was talking about, some of that. But I think that the gorilla in the room, the huge draw for me at least, were the
So
visual effects.
you want to say the effects for last?
Huh? We could do that. Let's save the effects for last. So let's get into the story then. Let's get into the actual story as it progressed. And I will say that the story is let's go to Jeff first. Let's go with you on the story, and then I'll go ahead and come in behind you. What did you think of the story? How it was crafted, the characters within the story, and how well it worked as far as spinning a fantasy narrative, a tale, because
Now,
this is an original story.
Yeah.
So.
The story. Well, one thing about the story, if you're going to do an action movie, you want it to move. There's no real lulls here. The lulls here make sense where you've got them. You got the dream sequence. You got things like putting together the map. You've got things that establish characters, like picking out the sun from the bazaar, things like that. So that sort of thing is it all plays well. It's all useful to the story. And this definitely feels. I enjoyed it as an adult, and I enjoyed it as a kid, but it does feel a little bit more kiddish. It does feel a little bit more Disney in that kind of vein. In the way that you kind of get with the Pirates of the Caribbean, things move along. They're a little predictable, but not always predictable. But they're within that context. There's also some plot convenience, like the homunculus just happens to be flying over the ship with a piece. Now they do try and cover this by there's lots of talks about destiny and fate and things like that. That's a very big part of culture in that part of the world. So there's that discussion. But come on, man, the thing just kind of hangs out over the boat. Like, would somebody please shoot me with an arrow so I can drop this thing? So why didn't you just fly on and go back to your master? So there was no reason for that. But like, okay, but if that doesn't happen, we don't have a movie, that sort of thing. So there's moments like that that go on. But for the most part, the story is it's not just a lot of fun, but you do get some nice character bits. We get to see elements of finding out that, for instance, that Caroline Munro's character is in fact a slave. But Sinbad, he's a sailor because he is the freest of free men. If you wanted to get away from sovereignty, you hopped on a boat and you got there out there on the ocean. So every person on his boat is a free man, including any women that get on his boat. You are a free woman now. He just releases her from being a slave. And it takes her a little bit to get used to that sort of thing, which was a nice character touch, I thought. And once she does, she really gets into being that and doing what she can. She adventures along with the gang, just like the son, the worthless son from the bazaar, who gets put into indentured servitude to the captain. Basically, he adds a wonderful bit of comic relief to the story that kind of breaks any tension. So you've got your action, you got your philosophy, you got your comic relief, but it's a lot of fun because this character has an arc in the story as well, and he adds to it. We see this foolish, spoiled young boy grow into an adventuring man, and I like to see that in this film. So even though the film was not twists and turns like National Treasure or anything like that, or any other sort of a swashbuckling adventure film like an Indiana Jones, it's still a worthy film. It still builds arcs, it builds character, and it builds to a very satisfying conclusion by the time you get to the end.
Cool. Steve, what did you think?
Yeah, I will say, like, looking at it from a modern perspective, and trying to look at this movie as if it was a movie that was made now, you're gonna find like a lot of issues with it. But that having been said, if you appreciate it in the spirit that it was meant to be experienced, you get a really great experience out of it. So in terms of storyline, yeah, I mean the whole setup with the with the bat flying over and, just conveniently being right there. Okay, yeah, whatever. I mean, yeah, to set the plot in motion. How does, Sinbad get the dream? Because I don't think Tom Baker gave it to him, because why would he have sent the vision of the, of the girl with the eye tattoo? That doesn't make sense.
Wouldn't it have been nice if they said like Allah? Wouldn't it have been nice if they said like Allah sent you the dream? You've been chosen for the force of good.
Yeah, and they never explain how she gets that tattoo. They never explain where she comes from. They never explain any of her past. She doesn't know her past, in fact. When she's asked, it's just like, I don't know. I've always had this since I was a child. I don't know anything about that. Maybe she had some connection to Lagoria. I have no idea.
They're just chalking all that up to fate, and they just like anything we can't explain, fate.
Yeah, if fate did it, whatever. Yeah, anything we can't explain logically, it was fate doing it. I think it's lazy.
Yeah, there you go. For sure, it's all.
I think that and then it's like, I will say I have of two minds about the Kura character, the Tom Baker character. On the one hand, Tom Baker really sells this character, so I'm not saying he's a bad character at all. And in fact, in some ways, I really like him because I feel like he's actually a character who struggles. He deals with a magic system that generally is pretty consistent. They actually explain how his magic works. I dig that. I really enjoy that. And he struggles with that. He pays a price, and yet he thinks that price is worth it. And he continues on his mission regardless. I'm just like, that's really interesting. On the other hand, he keeps getting gimmies. Like the story keeps giving him outs every single time. It's just absolutely amazing. Like, okay, you can fight the big statue of Kali with the 6 scimitars, or you can kill the wizard. Why aren't you killing the wizard? Just basic stuff like this. I happen to land my ship right next to where Sinbad's skiff is on the beach. Gee, I hope nobody notices me. No, nobody notices him. I'm going to come up with this explosive, and I'm going to explode the entire cavern around him. The explosion does not look like it would have brought down the whole thing. Just silly things like this here and there, and some of it is just kind of laughable. You don't know why the Cyclops thing is listening to what Tom Baker is telling him to do. Why are you obeying his commands? I don't know. That's what the plot requires. So you get stuff like this, okay, and it's ridiculous. But
to be fair, at least he did lose his box of explosives, so that was one thing that fell down. And like, who saw that coming? It's like, I tripped and slipped, and I lose all my my bombs.
There are a lot of goofy moments like this, but the rule of cool is so strong in this movie that you just don't care. And that's the fun of this movie. Like, it throws in all these really cool elements, swashbuckling pirates and, this really cool suave captain. You have this villain who is just really charismatic and, has this really interesting personality, and, he has well-developed drawbacks and a magic system, and you like him. And you have these, side characters that are really good. I completely agreed about Haroon, the kid. He goes from being a total wastrel, who I don't know if he's he's just been drinking his life away or drugging his life away or what. But he gets cleaned up, and then he actually becomes a member of the crew, and he earns his keep and then some, and he actually makes a difference in the Kali fight. Yeah. Which, I mean, he actually ends up becoming, he's not a load like a lot of comic relief characters are. He is a character who ends up having a growth arc, and he contributes something by the end. And that is so much better than a lot of Disney comic sidekicks that you see, who are, a lot of times, are just there to have laughs, and they're worthless. This guy is not. He's a cool character. So you have a lot of these sorts of things. And even the vizier who becomes the king, he has a really interesting story as well. That his face is burned off, and he's forced to wear this Greek helmet, this Greek mask, so that nobody can see him, and how he's having to earn his kingdom by the end of the movie, which he does, and so it's like, you get all these characters that have these different stories, and they come together. It's all part of Sinbad's story. Sinbad, more or less is kind of the same, but everybody around him, changes and grows, and that's really interesting as well. So there's a lot to like in this movie. Like I may bash on certain stupid elements of it and things that are silly, but it's just everything else is so good, that I have to let it go. I had too much fun.
Steve, let me ask you a question. Do you think, and I think you'll probably agree with me on this, were this film done today with the same sort of charm and love put into it, wouldn't this work better as a 3-part series, like a Pirates of the Caribbean, where you can actually fill in?
Yeah, it probably would be set up as a trilogy.
Yeah, because then you could fill in all those missing gaps. You could actually tell the complete story. You don't have to do it all, like in an hour and 44.
Well, the thing that gets me about this movie, and so there's really two ways that I watch this movie. One is the way I watched it when I first saw it, which is I just enjoy the effects. I watch the movie and I really don't care what's going on as long as it's entertaining. And that is a perfectly fine way to watch it.
You're the reason we had 5 Transformer movies.
Yes, exactly. And then the other way I watch this movie is I watch it with my writer hat on, like we talk about when we're on Sloppy Spoilers podcast with, and so when I do that, I do have to say, there, like you guys have already talked about a little bit, some of it is quite ridiculous. The things I would point out, for instance, is the guy who's a wastrel, the guy who's a drunk. We don't get any backstory. We don't even get any reason why, particularly the dad wants to get rid of him, because the movie doesn't care why the dad wants to get rid of him. The movie just wants to get him on the boat with the slave girl.
I just figured like the dad was, tried like for ages to try to get him, out of his funk and to try to make him productive. And it's just like, I'm just getting him to you because I don't know what else to do with this guy.
He's that kid. He's that
exactly.
kid he's that kid whose parents enlist him in the military to straighten him out.
Yeah.
Right. That's exactly
right. And the same thing goes for like when the figurehead on the ship comes to life. It's such a cool moment. But then if you got to stop and break it down writing wise, it's like, would somebody just push that thing over the edge or something because this movie's so slow? But it's like, who cares? It's fun. It's cool.
Yeah, it's moving slow, but it's like 800 pounds.
Yeah, exactly. It doesn't.
Yeah, and I know exactly where to go to get the chart, to get the nautical chart. I'm like, yeah, right.
There's just lots of cool little things. And really, this movie is an outgrowth of movies that were around in the 30s and 40s and 50s.
Yeah.
Movies Errol Flynn, like The Seahawk with Errol Flynn.
Nice
it's like
one.
just just pop it out. You got some comic relief in there. You got a beautiful woman in there. You've got action. You've got a daring figure who's standing with his hands on his hips, straight and tall, to root for.
Captain
you got
Morgan.
you got an action score going on and everything, and it's like, hey, what can we throw in here? Well, we're going to Lemuria. Why don't we throw Kali in there? But this is, Arabian Nights. Yeah, who cares? They're close enough. We'll throw an Indian goddess on there. So.
That's like Hollywood understood that most of America at the time would not know the difference.
Dudes.
Yeah, it's like, hey, we need.
I don't know if you guys noticed, but like I love the initial set piece when they're running to the castle. I was like, that's an awful European looking castle. Better cover that with a lot of ivy.
Yeah, or another example, and then we'll move on. Because I'm not bagging on the movie. It's just it's part of the charm of the movie. It's part of the way the movie is. If you go in there with the overly critical eye, there's a lot to find. But like Steve said, the rule of cool is that everything else is so cool, it's so much fun that you got to let some of this go to enjoy it. Another one is okay, we're gonna have a bunch of natives on Lemuria. Well, hey, it's fantasy, it's Arabian Nights. Let's paint them all green. So
yeah, this is like this is the D&D version of the Arab mythos.
Yeah,
it's this mishmash of things that we like set kind of sort of mostly into this one setting, but we'll sprinkle in other things.
Yeah, somewhere along the way, Willy Wonka abducted their cousins, and they're the Oompa Loompas. So these are the cousins of the Oompa Loompas here on Lemuria, basically the green ones. So these are the green M&Ms of the Oompa Loompa clan there. There's no reason why they're green. There's no reason why they're they're doing Kali. I mean, and then the creature, the creatures are just cool as hell.
Yeah,
But
why couldn't it? Yeah, why couldn't it have been one of the many? I don't know. Maybe they just didn't want to have a god from Arabia other than Allah mentioned. I don't know.
it's
It could have.
possible.
It could have just been an Ifrit they were worshiping. Something like that. Although
But
Yeah, or
the
the
oracle was a nice touch as an Ifrit or a gene.
yeah, but yeah, I mean, a Freets would have been awesome. But how easy would it have been to do a Freets with the
But then
what they
again,
had at the time?
maybe Ray just was like, "Hey man, I got a really cool idea.
Yeah.
6-arm sword fight.
Yep.
However you got to make that work. Sell it. You're done. Do it."
Although the one that makes me laugh a little bit now is how Kali comes to life and has to do a whole 6-arm dance for everybody, doing her thing. It's cool as hell, but it's kind of
That's
it's like,
the ego of the sorcerer.
yeah.
And here's another thing, Buckbeak coming completely out of nowhere and
Yeah.
fighting the Cyclops. I'm like, where's the Griffin come from? Nowhere. Is it cool to watch
Yeah.
a Griffin and a Cyclops fight? Hell yeah.
Yeah, but it's not even. You see, that's one of the weird things. It's like, and this is kind of the genius of the movie, and it's like, okay, because it's imaginative and it's so out of left field. I have never in my life had I ever seen a half Cyclops, half Centaur creature before, and I've never seen one since. It doesn't exist,
I think Ray just repurposed his Cyclops from the previous film and just redressed him a little bit, and it gave him something cool that we'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And this reminds me of an article I was reading about comics in the 70s. So this is the same time period. They talk about how the more modern audiences like so in the 70s, Superman would be flying over the ocean, and all of a sudden the sea serpent would pop out of the ocean, and it's got kryptonite vision, and it shoots Superman, and he falls in the ocean, he loses his powers, and he loses his memory, he ends up on an island, and he has this adventure where he tries to find himself. He's like, but if you do that now, you would have to explain, well, where did the sea serpent come from? Why does it have kryptonite vision? How did that steal Superman's memory as well as his powers? But back then, nobody cared. It was all rule of cool, as Steve's saying, like, that sounds pretty cool. Let's just throw it in there.
And I will say this, for all of you who have watched this on Sloppy Spoilers and everything, it may sound like we're contradicting ourselves. And to a certain extent we are, but we are for a purpose, because it really depends on what you're doing. If you want to tell a deep, in-depth story that's going to give all those facts and all that information, then you need to take the time to establish it. Now, if you just want to tell something cool that is a roller coaster ride that you can enjoy, then you know what? You need to count on the good faith of your audience, but go for it, and you don't need to go into the whole backstory. It's like Steve said, where the hell did Buckbeak come from? Who knows? Who cares?
Buckbeak. Cracks me up.
Harry Potter wrote him in and then hit his head on the wall and fell off, so whatever is going on. But yeah, so we got all this going on. So that brings us, let's go right into effects. And I'm going to start, and I'm going to go, Steve, and I'll finish up with Jeff on this one. But I will say, for me, most people know the name Ray Harryhausen. The guy was an absolute genius with visual effects, especially stop motion, but he did much more than that. And he did some acting as well. He's in one of my lesser known movies that I enjoy, which is Spies Like Us. He plays somebody in that movie, a doctor.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. There are some things in here that push some boundaries. And one of the ones I thought was so cool was where Tom Baker's character brings to life a homunculus, and the homunculus is interacting with him on the table and retreating from him. And this whole, the emotion that they get out of that scene, and a lot of it is going to go down to Baker's acting. But it's so cool to see the dialogue as this creature comes to life through the blood of this evil sorcerer, and then the two of them interacting and everything, and knowing how it was shot, and how they had to superimpose the animation on top of the actual, motion picture stock, the frame.
Yeah, there is some film compositing there.
Yeah, it's just absolutely incredible, and it really is a testament to the acting as well, and the same goes for all of the stunts in here. And I'm hoping that Jeff will talk a little bit about this, because he's a big into stunts and everything. But all of those fight scenes have to be done to the open air. They didn't even use, because they would put the actual model in later, which is absolutely incredible when you think about it and you go back and watch the movie again. So I'm going to go to Steve first. This is your first time experiencing this. I'm sure you've experienced Harryhausen before, but what did you think about all the effects and how they were done in this movie?
Oh, they were pretty good. I mean, for particularly for its time. I mean, Ray Harryhausen, I mean, was an absolute genius when it came to fight choreography and special effects and moving everything to the next level. And I think that he certainly did with this movie. I mean, some of the stuff like with the bow of the ship coming to life as a wood golem. I'm like, okay, that's really awesome. And you have some really great fights with her fighting the crew, and it's just like, yeah, that's really great. The Khalif fight we've gone over a number of times. That's a really exciting fight. There are things that are silly about it, but I love the way the fight plays out. You get the Haroon getting that heroic moment at the end. You get all of these people, all the various members of the crew going in at it with scimitars, and yeah, that's really cool. You get all of the whole centaur Cyclops thing fighting Buckbeak. Really, really great stuff. And even the mundane fights, just Sinbad versus Tom Baker's character. Especially towards the end where Tom Baker is half invisible. Yeah, the invisibility effects are a little weak. I don't deny that, but for its time, I thought that it was perfectly reasonable. And it's just sort of like you're sort of wondering, okay, why don't you go and hit towards where the scimitar is? But okay, that's fine. It's very Hollywood fencing, where they're just doing the clank clank on the swords just to make it look cool. Yeah,
make sure they clash.
The old Bob Anderson technique. The way they used to do it.
But
you have a lot of that
effective. There. Now I have to ask you guys this question, because I haven't made up my mind myself. I watched this movie and I watched other movies with stop motion. Another favorite of mine that I think Harryhausen worked on, although I could be wrong. Army of Darkness. The Ash films. The sequel to Evil Dead 2.
The last thing Harryhausen did, if I'm not mistaken, was Clash of the Titans.
Is it? Let me look. Well,
I think that was his last film.
No, he did Mighty Joe Young in 1998.
Mighty Joe Young was CGI.
Well, he was on visual effects for Mighty Joe Young, so
okay,
he did
but
something.
I think Clash of the Titans was the last bit of stop motion he did.
Okay, well,
but if he was still around 98, he could have done some stuff on Evil Dead. Yeah,
I will check in just a moment. But what I was going to say is that I watched this and the way it moves, and I tried to envision it if it was CGI and it was very smooth. I don't think it would have the same charm, And maybe this is just nostalgia speaking on my part, but I wanted real quick before I go to Jeff. What are your guys' thoughts on that? I mean, is the way that the movements are, is that just nostalgia on my part, or does it bring a certain charm to the movie because it's not CGI'd? I'll go to Jeff first on this one.
I'll say it's a combination of both. We grew up with those films, so we know what they should look like. It's just like, Lance is always talking about film because he wants to see the film grain, because that's what we've grown up with. And so I get that. I enjoy seeing it as is, but there is a part of me that also wants to see it smoother. As a matter of fact, there is a YouTuber, I don't know the name of him, but he takes the Harryhausen footage and he ramps it up to 120 frames with smoothing, and it looks phenomenal.
I'm gonna have to check that out now.
Mm-hmm. It looks better than what Harryhausen does, and I'm thinking if I saw that in the cinema, I'd want to see that, because it, looking at last week at Dragon Slayer, it takes this and it makes it look like Dragon Slayer, like Phil Tippett's work. So, but again, when I watch this movie, I know what I'm getting into. Maybe somebody who's not as old as me wouldn't appreciate it as much, but I do appreciate a little bit that kind of strobe-y kind of motion that you sometimes get. How the shadows don't always play quite right, because he's lighting something this tall and trying to match the lighting on a full-scale set. So there's always some differences. So yeah, I think there's a bit of both to it. There's a charm to it. There's nostalgia to it. But
Uh,
I wouldn't mind having if somebody went back and did the smoothing, the frame smoothing, added in the extra frames. I would own a copy of both just because I like these films that much.
I'm going to go to Steve in just a second. I did want to answer. I just looked it up. You're right. The last thing that Ray worked on and was an active member of the cast was Clash of Titans. He was
Okay.
the VFX consultant on Mighty Joe Young. So he just consulted on the VFX for that. So Steve, what did you think about that question with the way, am I being nostalgic for the old times? I'm looking back to my youth, trying to recapture my golden years, or my glory years or whatever it is, however that saying goes. Or is there something to be said that, or is it a combination of both?
I kind of lean to a combination of both. Although I will say, nostalgia has a way of shifting things, to make it look more attractive in hindsight. I think there could be a little bit of that. That having been said, I mean, not having seen it before and not having that attachment, I think there is a certain charm into it, and I think it fits the way this movie was shot in a way that, like, trying to do it in CGI would not work as well now. Because this is very much an old school movie, and it's being made in the style of like 1930s and 1940s swashbucklers, plus magic, plus special effects. And so, you don't want to have anything that's like overly realistic looking. You want to have a little bit of unreality in order to sell the fantasy, as it were. And I think the way that Harryhausen did it rides that line, I think, effectively enough. That it's not a big deal. Could you make it better? Sure. Absolutely. I think probably today you could, but I think the way that he did it was probably the best you could probably do it in the 1970s or whenever this was made.
If I was to remake this film and I wanted to improve the special effects, I would not go the CGI route.
I would not either.
Not just for the nostalgia reason, but also because, like Steve said, that wouldn't fit. It wouldn't look right. Even if you grained it up, dumbed it down, do all that, I would probably take the Alien 3 route that they did and do a rod puppetry and just, remove the elements that you don't want. And I think it would still kind of approach what you wanted, but with like a slightly more updated look.
Yeah.
But the best version is what that guy on YouTube's doing. He's just frame smoothing and adding in extra frames.
Listening to you guys, I do think that you're right. I think it's a combination of both. And I'll say this may be right out of left field, but when I look at the Ray Harryhausen stuff and the way they move and the way it's photographed, I always go right back to the other, stop motion animation that I loved as a kid so much, which was all the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, cartoons and all that stuff, So, it's just that certain way of movement and everything, and it just takes me back there all the time. But
there is one thing I do notice that I lose when I watch the updated YouTube videos. When I watch this movie, I can see where Ray's put on his hands. I can see each individual movement. And so when you up the frame rate and you up the smoothness, and now it does look like a living thing. It moves like a living thing 100%. But when I watch this, I can see the artistry.
I would, anybody out there in the comments, if you have a question or an answer to this, let us know. But I wish there was a documentary or somebody had actually filmed, and time-lapse photography, Ray doing all of these various intricate animated moves and how much it take for him to film these scenes, because it just had to be incredible. Yeah.
Months. I can tell you flat out, it took months. It took so long to do things like this that when Japan wanted to create their own King Kong, once they found out the rate of time that stop motion took, they said, like, okay, we're going to invent monster suits and do that. That's where they went. Now, if you want to see some of the stuff in action, and thank God people like Tim Burton and others have brought stop motion back into vogue, which pleases me to dickens. There's some nice behind the scenes stuff of Kubo and the Two Strings, where you can actually see the animators animating in that stop motion, like the rapid time, and looking at all the work goes into just having this monkey travel down a short distance. It's incredible.
So we got a little bit off track, but on very cool stuff. I want to get back to you, Jeff, on the special effects. What are your thoughts on the effects of this movie, how it was done, how it compares to, all of Harryhausen's other work? but I was hoping you would also talk a little bit about the marriage of the live action with this stop motion,
I
animation.
would be glad to, and I actually have some thoughts on that. I'll give you my perspective today, my perspective back then. So I'm old enough to have seen this when it came out, which was really really freaking cool. Because the whole time, I should have known I was going to be a geek from an early age. Because all the time I'm watching this, I'm not just blown away, but there is a part of my mind going like, "How are they doing that? How are they doing that? That thing is right there with them. How are they doing that?" And they do this not always 100% successfully, but close enough that the care taken to match the wooden statue on the ship with the model that Harryhausen's animating is so spot on. So like when it tears away, it looks so good. Another thing that really sells these moments is the sound design. I gotta give it up for the people who did the sound design. The wooden golem creaks and groans, and it sounds like a heavy piece of wood. It sounds like a tree in a thunderstorm. Just it sounds, and it eerily it kind of blends in with the sounds of a ship, which is great because ships at sea creak and groan because they're made out of wood, and the water is dynamic and it's fluid and it's pressing on them. So just a lot of great attention paid. I love the sound of the bronze statue of Kali. It's clang, clang whenever it steps. And when it moves, it makes these like click, click noises. Like fantastic stuff. So good. One of my favorite sequences is when he's resurrecting the homunculus and he takes it out. And so I get to see the dead thing and then he brings it back to life. And like you said, the acting between Baker and the puppetry is really good because Harryhausen's ability to convey emotions out of these fantastical characters is just second to none. The thing comes back to life and it's initially wary and afraid. Who knows? We don't know how the homunculus works. Does it remember dying? Does it remember this is the guy who keeps sending it off to die over and over again? And he even threatens it for a moment. I don't know if this is a process of taming or what. It's another one of those unsaid things, but it's also interesting. He threatens it. He kind of laughs at its reaction, and then he coaxes it like a little pet. He coos to it. He brings it here, like come here with me. And then the next thing, once it's accepted him, he can order it once again. So just really,
he's a classic Wizards familiar. It's like it's like a Quasit or an imp.
Exactly. I'm pretty sure like Gygax probably swiped that from this film because that's perfect. I mean, it looks exactly like an imp. It's so good. I do wish that it had matched the scene a little bit better. This is one of the few times in because when we see the little rubber homunculus, it's all wet and so it's black and shiny, and that's one of those cases where it doesn't match so well. But most of the time they do a really great job. My other nitpick is actually my favorite scene in the film. This is my favorite piece of Harryhausen's work. I love the Kali dance. I love the Kali fight, and it's I know Steve's got an issue with this. I'm sure, like he's talking about how funny it is. The prince throws his sword and Kali catches it, and they're like, I can magically make more swords because magic works, right?
I was more bothered by why would Sinbad throw a sword to this guy? You're going to play.
He's an honorable man. He's honorable, right? So we've seen. Don't be a Ned Stark; it gets you killed. So there's that. But here's the thing that always bugged me about that. Sinbad is using a saber. He tosses a saber to the other guy, and then he gets a sword. And you see, it's got the slashed off tip, so he's got more like a scimitar blade.
Mm-hmm.
And you see some of his other crew. They've got differences between like saber style blades and scimitar style blades. Prop guy, he and Ray apparently did not talk because wide shot Kali, scimitars. Live action Kali, where you just see swords threatening Sinbad in the frame, sabers. All of them are sabers. I was like, okay, there was a lack of communication here. It's magic.
Well, I will also say, from a purely weapons perspective, the number one thing, and I got this after watching some other. There's a great YouTube channel. I think it's Scola Gladiatoria, where they talk about.
Oh yeah, he's a good HEMA guy.
historical fighting. But one of the things that gets me all the time now, especially after watching his channel, is when someone comes out and then they decide to plant their sword into the ground or plant their sword into a piece of wood.
You're blunting your tip.
Yeah. So, it's like, congratulations. You've now created a mace out of your bladed weapon. So,
yeah. And like, I'm a big fan of so many of those, like Skollengram, Shadversity, Lindy Beige, all those guys. I'm big into like martial arts and the hemos and extraction of that. But yeah, you see this in watching what Harry does. Like, I'd already been just blown away by the Jason and the Argonauts skeleton fight scene. But this, I feel like, might have even been more challenging in a way, because now he's got to coordinate these 6 arms off this one creature. And it bloody works. I mean, it's so good. It kicks the living crap out of General Grievous versus Obi-Wan. I buy this more still, almost as old as
I think General Grievous probably did base it off of Kali.
I'm sure they did. Because Lucas is a big fan of old films. So oh, that's really cool. I'll give him 4 arms instead of 2 because I don't want to be a total copycat. And Grievous has got some really cool moves where he can rotate his entire wrist, which is really cool. Why he didn't do that more in the fight, I don't know. They actually play Grievous better in the Clone Wars TV show than they did in the movie. Yeah. He's actually way more of a threat, way more credible as a danger to Jedi. But back to this. And it's just wonderful because, like you said, Nim, these guys, and again, referencing Star Wars, they have to do the same thing in the Star Wars film. When you're fighting the robots, the droids, they're not there. And so these guys are pretending to block blaster bolts, and they're whacking at things like, okay, there's a guy on your left. Whack. There's a guy on your right. Oh, there's a guy behind you. Stab behind you. They're having to do all that. So this sort of combat has existed for a long time in film. And the genius of Rey, and once again, even with that homunculus scene, Rey has to pay very particular attention to where Tom Baker's eye line is and match the homunculus to that on the plate. And now he's got to do it in this wide shot with all these sailors running in to fight Kali. Oh, my goodness. Like the headache that must have been, but it still freaking works to this day.
And the thing that you have to realize, sorry to interrupt, but for all you out there, is that there's, this is not on video, on digital, where they can try and marry it up and make the animation work. These are individual frames of celluloid that they're laying on top of each other. And if it doesn't match up, then you got to go back and redo it all over again.
Precise measurements of everything on the set have to be taken. He has to know how high the camera is, the angle of the camera. He has to know where every light is placed, the angle it is, the strength of light, what the bounce is in the room to get you proper reflections and bounce light coming off. The logistics that go into this are astronomical. And this guy is working very permanent. Remember, like, for those of you out there who don't know, this is the day when, like, if you wanted to edit a piece of film, you took the film, you cut it, take that section out, and you splice it together.
Yep.
And I bless you, Lance, for doing what you do. I never shot anything on film. Closest I got was DV. All of my editing is done digitally. I understand. I appreciate it. I love film, man, but I do not want the headache of film. I'll leave that to auteurs like you, Lance. I am much happier shooting on digital. I guess I'm a videographer and not a filmmaker.
Yeah. And they would go back and do this stuff, and it had to be perfect.
And that's a huge cost. If you screw up and it has to be done, that's a huge cost in time and money. And time is money in Hollywood. You don't want to go over budget. You don't want to go over time. There are scheduled release dates. So, this is why Harry worked for forever, because he was the best. He made sure he was the best. And you got to hand it to the stunt guys who are selling fighting, a 12-foot tall statue with 6 arms that they can't even bloody see. Kudos on everybody involved.
And I have to say, and we'll finish up here just a second, but I have to say personally, I don't think you can underestimate the cultural impact of this film and films like it, because Clash of the Titans, the Sinbad movies, a variety of other movies that brought this mythology to life for us to see.
Mm.
I mean, talk about it sparked my imagination as a
Yes.
kid of wanting to do this and write this stuff and experience this stuff. And there was no other way to bring this to life in film at the time.
I
There
mean,
was no way.
I ideally wish somebody, I said on Twitter, I wish somebody would come along and make these Sinbad movies with the same love and energy that they put into this film. We got the new Clash of the Titans, which to my mind, like, no offense to the players involved, there's a lot of good actors and people involved, but it's just not as good to me as the Harryhausen film. Better story. Uh,
Mm.
it just plays better. It is a better story. It's told better in a lot of ways. I know they were trying to do their own thing a little bit, and I applaud them for doing that.
Mhm.
And they had some interesting ideas in there. I just think the old movie's better, and that's not nostalgia talking. That's just objectively looking at the film. But I miss those days. I think the next closest thing we got was Gods of Egypt, which was weird in a way because, okay, I'm going to say it. There's like an awful lot of white people in this film. I expected at least kind of brown people. That would have made more sense to me. But like, okay, but I did kind of enjoy it in the fact that it brought something that we don't typically get to see to the screen.
Well, it's
I
like,
would have, yeah, I would have liked to. It felt very New Gods-ish, and I would love to see somebody do more stuff of this on this grand scale. Let's have some more Greek mythology. Let's have some North mythology. Let's have some
or even
African mythology. Let's do all these great mythologies: Chinese, Japan, Korea. Just there's a world of fantastic mythology out there, and I would love for somebody to do these epic scale fantasy movies and just bring it to life for us, like I used to enjoy as a kid.
or even brand new stuff. I mean, one of the movies, it's not the greatest movie in the world, but I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I like watching it just because of the uniqueness of the
Well, I was
setting.
including brand new stuff.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
Mortal Engines.
Hmm.
I think it's just a fun movie to watch, even if it's not the greatest movie in the world, which it isn't.
But it might
But
get you interested in reading the books.
yeah, and there's some really cool things in there that you've never seen on screen before. So I enjoyed that. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot we could talk about. Lance is off doing his stuff, and I'm sure he could give us a lot of information on filming. But I think we covered a lot
Yeah.
of it, as
Yeah.
well. Um, Real quick before we go, what are your guys' final thoughts on the legacy of this film and how we could, we kind of talked about it a little bit, but kind of put it more into, more concretely, what is the legacy of this film uh, that it has now, and how can we use this film going forward, do you think? So, Jeff, you want to take that one first, or I can go first?
I'll be brief because I've already had a lot to say this particular podcast. It almost doesn't have a legacy. If it does have a legacy, I think that perhaps the people who made Pirates of the Caribbean might have been fans of this film. I think it's pretty clear that George Lucas has at least seen this with the General Grievous. I can't confirm that. I don't know that for sure. And so I think, unfortunately, that's kind of where the legacy stops. I would like for the legacy of this film to be an expansion into the Arabian mythos. That's what I would love to see. So I hope someone out there sees this and takes that to heart and can figure out how to do something with it. Because the last thing I've seen that was anything like this is it was Amazon. They had a Sinbad TV series,
Mm-hmm.
and unfortunately, it wasn't very good. I stopped watching it about 5 episodes in. It didn't have all of the qualities that make this great, even with all of the plot issues and just plot armor and stuff like that. Convenience.
I think
It
you're gonna be
just yeah.
yeah. I have an idea, but I'm curious what you guys say in just a second. Steve, what do you think about this film? Does it, its legacy? Does it still have its legacy? Does it have is there a future for what it can bring to us now, as far as filmmakers and things?
I think this is a hidden gem. I think this is honestly, this was not a movie I was hugely aware of, to be honest. So I can't imagine that a lot of people in the general public would be aware of this film today, which is a shame because I think this is definitely a film that should be seen, and it should be in the same vein as Clash of the Titans, which a lot of people do know. And yeah, I think the original Clash of the Titans is probably going to stand the test of time. People still talk about it. People don't talk about the new one at all. So that ought to tell you like what Harryhausen has achieved in his career. Unfortunately, this movie doesn't have that reputation. I think I'm kind of in agreement. I think to the extent that this has a legacy, it's to the extent that it has influenced filmmakers since then. Particularly Lucas, particularly people who made the Pirates films and whatnot. Anybody else that has really made monster fantasy type films, is probably going to take some hints from Harryhausen, across his career, and probably this film is going to have a certain amount of that. But unfortunately, I think this is really one of those movies that needs to be talked up more for it to have an impact, because right now it's just one of those that has been dipped under the radar, and I think unfortunately, just hasn't been remembered in the way that it should have, and that's a shame because I think there's a lot of real value in this movie. I think that there's a lot of fun in this movie. I think that there is a lot of really good creative work with the stop motion. I think that some of the characters are really interesting, and just the fact that they thought out the magic system. That's something you do not see, particularly in films this old.
No.
Like nobody put thought into how to do blood magic in 1970 some. I mean, stuff like this needs to be considered more. And
that felt like legit medieval magic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And also the fact that the wizard is paying a price for calling on the dark powers. I mean, that is something that is more in vogue now, but back in the past, you were more likely to get the poof of smoke.
We're used to magic looking like the Force or Avatar, where you just get it.
Yeah.
Now, for me, I will say that I see that this movie has a legacy in two aspects, and I'll start with the easiest one to make first. Is that everything that we have, even in computer graphics today, is built on the way Harryhausen approached animation then. There was obviously hand-drawn animation. It kind of works on the same aspect where you're drawing the same picture over and over again with slight movements. But when you're doing something in a 3D space, and the natural progression from what Harryhausen did was what Pixar did early with computer animation, where they took 3D models and basically did exactly what Harryhausen was doing, but they did it inside a 3D simulated space. And
they were doing a keyframe animation for those models.
Yep. And eventually the simulation got and computing power got to a point where you could just say, okay, it's moving. You could just move the arm, and the computer would fill in the frames for you. So you didn't have to move it frame by frame. But all of that is built on the back. So all of modern CGI, pretty much, as far as actual model movement, not water and lighting and all that, but the model movement is built on Harryhausen's work. And I think that he deserves a lot of credit for that. Because
just to show how important this is, the original Jurassic Park was going to be stop motion. Phil Tippett, who worked on Dragon Slayer, was brought in to do the dinosaurs. And at the same time, they just happened to be developing this technology. And when they looked at it and realized it was going to be better, what they didn't know is like, okay, we know how to make it, but we don't know how to make it move right. So they kept Phil Tippett and his team on board to do run-through animations, and that allowed them to create the motion in the computer.
Right. Interesting you mentioned that, because the music video for the parody of Jurassic Park by Weird Al, that did use stop motion, and pretty solid stop motion.
Yeah, was it a claymation?
Claymation,
yeah. Now the other place that I still see the spirit of the kind of tales that Harryhausen liked to tell, and even some of the settings, it's in Japanese manga and anime. You still have a lot of these same kind of themes, including with the beautiful girl, and who is in there because she's a beautiful girl. Now, being Japanese manga or anime, they take it a little too far sometimes, because
panties.
Yeah, exactly.
The writers barely disguise fetish.
Yeah. But you still have that same theme where it's like, you know what, we're not going to go too far explaining it. Here is a courageous character. Here is a beautiful girl. They're going on this ship, and here's the comic relief. And they're going to do these things. And you're going to see some cool monsters. And you're going to see this. And you're going to see that. And you know what? We're not going to explain it to you. And you're not going to care. Sit back and enjoy.
It's all very classic. And I'll say this about the mangaka out there. They do what we don't. Is like there's manga that get into all kinds of different cultures. When you look at Full Metal Alchemist, that's very much based on Germany, kind of sort of before the Nazi period.
Yeah.
You look at that again on Attack on Titan. This is all set in a Germanic sort of setting when you look at the villages and the castle structures and things. So they explore all kinds of things outside of themselves, and they do it in a way that shows a love for it, and it's never forced. It's never because they feel like they have to make a quota. It's done out of love and a passion for these things that are outside their own culture, even though they obviously do a lot of stuff that's within their culture as well. They should. And so that's one of the reasons I love manga so much.
And they love to tell a variety of different stories in a variety of different ways. And, I'll be the first to admit I love manga and anime, but, I don't think I'm so shocking anybody to say that sometimes we see some of it and we're like, ooh, those the Japanese, when they do some of this stuff, they don't skimp, man. They go whole hog on it, and it's like, you're sitting there watching a show about, some Starship Troopers and suddenly there's panty flashes everywhere. And you're like, where did this come from? And,
Fan service.
Yeah. So, but, once you get past that kind of stuff, they're doing these kinds of things and telling these incredible stories. And you know what? We're going to get back to that here in the West. I think we are. But I think that spirit of Harryhausen's storytelling, that spirit of the storytelling from the 40s and 50s, which was just pure adventure for the sake of adventure, and you go out and you enjoy it, is still kept alive, I think, very much in the Japanese animation and manga. So
you know where you can find that here? It's not here yet, but it is coming. Blood World is coming.
Absolutely. Blood World is coming. So with that, excellent drop in there. Thank you very much. Blood World is coming from Raincross Press up there. Make sure you check out raincrosspress.com. I want to thank my co-host on this excellent broadcast. We will be finishing up our fantasy month next week with Willow from none other than George Lucas. And then after that, it's straight into October and Halloween Movie Madness. We have a poll for you up right now on our Twitter page at Cinema Crusaders. There are 4 movies on there you to choose from, and those will be one of our featured movies during the month. We are also hoping to have some guests, including someone that Steve and all of us are very familiar with, Mike Nunnally. We're hoping we can have him on for 1 or 2 of the movies to talk about. But the 4 movies you have on our poll right now, please go vote at cinemacrusaders.com. We'll make sure we get this out there again for everybody. You could choose from Psycho, The Exorcist, The Devil's Advocate, or Play Misty for Me, Clint Eastwood's directorial debut. And really, it was, what is that movie had Glenn Close in it?
Where she boils the bunny?
Fatal Attraction. Yeah, this is really Fatal Attraction before Fatal Attraction. So,
yes, this film is a psychological horror, not a boogeyman horror.
Yep. But you will never hear the words, Play Misty for Me, the same way again after watching that movie. So, but I want to thank my co-host. Thank you so much, Jeff, for being here and talking about this movie with me.
Until next time we sail the 7 seas.
Amen. So, and thank you so much, Steve, for watching this movie, enjoying this movie for the first time, and talking about it with us.
Yeah, no problem. And I will say, we ride the winds of destiny, where we know not where, we know not why. We just ride the wave and enjoy the rule of cool.
And I will say, everybody out there, make sure you check out the Comic Crusaders YouTube channel and all of the podcasts that we have on Undercover Capes. Also, check out tomorrow, this crew here, plus DT2 and Mike Nunley will be on the Omen Revelations podcast. We'll be talking about Blood World and Rain Cross Press. And then on Sundays, if you're into that, you can check out the Fellowship of the D20, where both Steve, Shadewing, and I, we are on there doing our darndest not to get killed while we're adventuring in D&D land. And
Well,
Jeff,
Burley's going to eat every damn thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
Jeff
and I think we're going to go back to our main group that this week too.
yeah, Jeff roots for ravenous halflings to eat everything.
I'm
So,
telling you, the guy's a step away from being a cannibal.
so until next week, when we're going to talk about Willow, thank you everybody for watching this episode of Cinema Crusaders, and we'll see you next week at the movies. Talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.